Shalom Bethel family. I wanted to share my remarks from this past Shavuot Yizkor service, which was on Monday. These are not only Yizkor remarks, but also particularly remarks following the terrible shooting on May 31st in Virginia Beach at the Municipal Center. All week I was thinking a lot about the lyrics of Naomi Shemer's great song, Al Kol Eila. It was a song published in 1980. It was a pretty good time in Israel. It was post the Camp David Accords and peacemaking with Egypt, pre the Intifada and the Lebanon War. And even in that moment, Naomi Shemer wrote this song that begins, every bee that brings the honey needs a sting to be complete, and we all must learn to taste the bitter with the sweet. It is a beautiful melody and such poignant words. They not only describe the reality of the state of Israel in 1980 and today, always more complicated and difficult than we expect, but they really tell the complexity of all life. Nothing is ever as simple as we wish. It's not about things being all bitter or all sweet, but the combination of them, that's where the poem forces us to focus our attention. And it's where my attention has been over the course of this past week. Our tradition teaches us that there is sweetness to be found even in the worst situations, just as there is always a little taste of bitterness even at our moments of greatest joy. But then there are times that seem to be just bitter, like a couple of Fridays ago on May 31st. Surely on that Erev Shabbat, there was only bitterness as 12 innocent people were gunned down mercilessly in Virginia Beach. Is there even a shred of sweetness to be found in that horrible tragedy? Our tradition claims that there is. Though it may be hard to find, our tradition asks us to search for it. Now, don't misunderstand me. This incident is a bitter, bitter moment for our city and our region. And quite frankly, it's a bitter moment in our country as there's so much gun violence. It would be better, of course, if this had never happened. And yet that is not the world we live in. It is not the reality that we get to choose these kinds of things. And so it is our task to search for meaning in this absurd chaos and the bitterness of this moment. But Judaism gives us the tools to recognize that complexity, the bitterness and the sweetness in everything. At our happiest occasions, Judaism teaches us to mix in a little bit of the sad. For example, our most famous ritual, perhaps certainly our most famous wedding ritual, when we smash a glass at a wedding, it's to bring us down a little. Usually explained as a remembrance of the destruction of the temple or a remembrance of the brokenness of the world. Or even on a Yom Tov, like Shavuot, when I was delivering these remarks, these are times we are commanded to be happy. It's a mitzvah to be happy on our chagim, on our festivals, and yet we stop and we pause to say the Yizkor prayers. Why would we stop on a day when it is a mitzvah to be happy, to engage in a somber remembrance of those who we loved and lost? The truth is that breaking the glass and Yizkor do not make us sad. Rather, they are calling out the bitterness that is already there and that we can do nothing about. On our holidays, we inevitably remember the ones who we love and who made the best matzah balls for Passover or the best dairy kugel for Shavuot. We don't remember those we are missing because of Yizkor. Yizkor really merely ritualizes the inevitable longing we feel on these most joyous days, because it is always a mixture. These are the days that we miss those people most. And it is better to name it with the ritual of Yizkor than to pretend it's not there and like we can just be happy because the Torah says so. And the same holds true regarding weddings and other simchas. We are overjoyed by the moment, but we are also sad, or at least sensing an absence. Right? When we're naming a baby after someone who we've lost, we're overjoyed that we have this baby, but there's somebody inevitably missing. That's why we have tears at brisses and weddings and bar mitzvahs. There's always going to be a little bit of sadness. And so we name it. The naming of that little bit of sadness that we feel at our happiest times reminds us that the opposite is also true. Even at our saddest moments, there's always a little bit of joy to be found. This is why we often find ourselves laughing at a funeral. Not to be disrespectful, but because when we think of the life and the stories and what we shared with the person who's being talked about, there's a little happiness there, even in the sadness of losing them. And also on our serious and somber days, on Yom Kippur or on Tisha B'Av, we're supposed to be somber and sad, and yet we're often happy to be seeing people we don't get to see very often, or to see so many people in shul as we do annually, sharing these holidays. Even if they're sad, we can't help but be a little happy, because there's sweetness in the bitterness. As our faith teaches us, it is always a mixture. Which brings us back to this past May 31st. Can we find a shred of beauty in that terrible moment? Yeah, if we try hard enough, we can. And it helps to try to focus on something than the obvious, senseless loss. Maybe that shred of recognition of beauty comes in witnessing all the good people coming together in the aftermath to try to make a difference for the future, to comfort the bereaved, to heal the wounded, to create a better tomorrow. Maybe we find that sweetness, as Mr. Fred Rogers said and is often quoted at moments like this, when we look for God in the people who rush in to help. And surely these officers who ran into that building in the municipal center to get into a gunfight with this shooter so that no one else would be harmed. I mean, that's amazing that multiple people would do that for others, and coworkers who helped each other. I spent a lot of time this past week thinking about Keith Cox, the son of Bishop E. Ray Cox, leader of the New Hope Baptist Church. Keith was, by the accounts of all of his coworkers, an amazing, loving friend and person, a man who was always there for others. Over the course of the holiday, several obituaries had been printed in our local paper, the Virginia Pilot. Everyone described Keith's hugs. He gave these great big bear hugs that just supported you and let you know that he would be there for you no matter what. And it turned out he was. When the shooting started, Keith was a worker, and he helped 6 or 7 of his coworkers get to safety, take shelter in a room, and barricade the door. But he stayed on the other side of it. They begged him to come in. He said, no, there might be other people who need help. And sure enough, the shooter did come around. He found the hiding place, but he couldn't get through the door. Keith had saved the lives of all of his coworkers. Keith was killed about 10 feet away from the door to their safe room. One of those saved by Keith, Christy Dewar, called her mother in Oklahoma to tell her how Keith had saved them just after the shooting. Her mom said, God had a guardian angel walking the earth with Keith. Keith was your guardian angel, baby. Don't you forget. Keith Cox was both a hero and a victim on that fateful day. The bitterness of losing such a man is beyond understanding. The cost is much too high to bear, and still the inspiration of knowing that such a man existed, one so good, so selfless, reminds us of the ongoing goodness in the world and that there must be others like him. That in fact, well, it's so easy to think that people are just worse than we think. In fact, a lot of people are much better than we can possibly imagine. In the write-ups in the paper of the church services in memory of Keith, there was a lot of sadness and bitterness, but there was also joy and singing. Sweetness, because it's always there when we know where to look for it. Every bee has its stinger. Every rose has its thorn. Everything is more complicated than we expect or can possibly understand. Even at a moment like this, when we are bereft and justifiably scared about our safety and the safety of all those around us, even in a moment of doubt about our society and about human nature, there is also the resource for comfort and for solace in the form of the good people, in the form of Keith Cox and others who helped on that day and who help save lives every day in ways that might not be as grand, but are no less important. Feeding the hungry, protecting the innocent, teaching children, healing the sick, caring for friends and family, and so many more. There are so many good people doing so much good in the world. The only tragedy is that we only stop to see it in comparison with the evil. And we think about how should we respond in this moment? One, to be more aware of all the good people, more grateful to all they bring into the world all the time. And it shouldn't take something like this for us to appreciate good people. And second, we can get involved in these sorts of activities to be the heroes ourselves, being the resource of comfort and consolation, of community and caring. There is no better response to evil than to work on behalf of good. It is that complexity that we embrace on days that we turn to our Yizkor Memorial Prayers, that mix of bitter and sweet, that recognition of good and evil. On Shavuot, we not only prayed for our relatives, we also prayed in memory of Keith Cox and the other 11 of his co-workers who were killed that day. But we also tried to embrace the complexity of remembering, to find the sweetness. And as we do Yizkor prayers, or every day as we remember our loved ones, it's our job to do the same. We will never be able to fill that void, to rid ourselves completely of the bitterness of their absence. And at the same time, we have the opportunity to embrace the complexity of our relationships with them and to draw on their memory, the sweetness of shared life and lessons and values. Even in the bitterness of their absence, there is joy to be found. I hope we're all able to embrace that, to see the beauty and the joy more fully and be grateful for it as we move forward. Our vision is clouded by the painful incidents happening all around us. We have to make an effort. Look for the good. It's there. Lots of good people. May we all embrace each other and lift each other up at moments like this.